All right, let's see what we got here. I got to get Alex on the screen. I got to turn these names off.
Anybody else? Is Richard coming through staticky for anyone else?
Yeah, I think your bandwidth seems to be a bit low at the moment compared to the other folks. Richard.
Yep, agreed. Yep.
Yeah, I've got a fuzzy picture of you too, Richard.
Really?
Well, it's just information. Yeah.
It's near Washington, D.C. It's the government burning up all the bandwidth to manage the crisis.
Huh. Is it still that way?
Yeah, but I don't know if that's I don't know if that's what's going to YouTube. It's just going to us, so maybe it won't be so bad. What's going out? So check any other windows that are relevant.
Let me close things down here. Some things. Oh, that's not fun. Of course, you can only tell until you can't tell until. Let me pull Alex in here. You can't tell until you go live half the time. So.
You don't get a program monitor until the program's on.
Exactly. Here's Brad. Is it still fuzzy or whatever?
Huh. Yeah, it's like QuickTime 1993.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
It's a little bit better than that.
Cinepack radius.
For editing and video works.
Let me see what is different. What do I have that's different? I don't know.
I don't have the. Do we have the radius DV codec? Maybe I need to install that. Rad DV, yeah.
Let me check something here. Scarlet USB. Huh. Skype. I wonder if I'm coming through Skype for some odd reason, as well as my normal audio. That I don't know, or else it's my internet.
I will say everybody else looks kind of amazingly sharp and clear and fluid, and there's no...
So...
You do have a screaming child in the background, though.
I don't hear
Hey,
that.
that's the best part of it, dude.
Let me see something here. Let me listen to my...
So coming soon from Skype, as you've already had visual background blur, soon you'll have family blur, in which your family is blurred out and you can't hear them.
No, I want more of those clips from the BBC of that fellow on stage and his kid comes on. Please.
You know what? It's coming through okay
awesome.
on... Well, I can't tell. Let me see if it's coming through okay on Facebook. It was coming through fine on YouTube, so maybe it's just a Skype issue.
It may be. Yeah, it doesn't. If it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. We don't need to have you in super resolution.
Well,
because
I
maybe
can also just
giving the bandwidth to more important things.
Oh.
Well, hello.
Hi, sweetie. It's affecting both your video and your audio signal. I'm getting a lot of dropouts on your audio, so it seems to be your upload bandwidth all the way around.
Okay.
Hello, who are we saying hi to?
Oh, let me check my
Emmeline,
at 5:30.
Except Emmeline can't hear us because Brad's got headphones on.
Yeah, she can, but that's okay. She can see you wave.
I'm checking my speed.
How do you spell her name, Brad?
It's like Emma, E-M-M-A, and then line, L-I-N-E.
Okay.
No, I got
you
like...
paused there at the end of that, dude. Like you were having to figure it out.
Well...
Hi, Emmeline.
Mommy is working from home, and she has to take calls from work, and that meant she got locked out of the bedroom. So she's very distraught. Because banging on the keyboards is her favorite thing.
No.
It's still blurred. It's blurring.
You have background blurring on. Yeah, you got to turn that off. Turn your background off. Oh. Look at this.
If I had to look at us five's ugly, I'd cry too.
Yeah.
Oh, Legos. Alex got Lego.
Nice.
The Danish are still going to take over with their Lego empire.
Virtual babysitting here is what we got going on.
Yeah.
That's what I need. Some
Brad, I'd tap full screen
middle-aged men talking to talking to my children.
No, don't do this, Emmeline.
No.
No, I won't even do it. We know what I was going to do.
You do not want to take her to the ICU this week.
That's for sure.
Not.
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. Here we are. We're going to be talking about Alex's Legos, and we're going to be talking about the new iPad, and we're going to be talking about what everybody's doing if you're working from home, if you're, I don't know what the right word is. I'm not in quarantine, but I certainly am not going anywhere. I'm staying right here. I have 1.5 acres of cushion all the way around me in all directions. And in Maryland, they've started doing they're letting the people that are 60 years and older get into the stores for the first hour of the morning.
Damn right.
Cool.
Because some of them don't get out later in the afternoons and stuff. It says, finally looking good here on Facebook. So I don't know what was going on. I listened to the YouTube stream, and it seems to be, I don't know, it was doing okay. Now it's like buffering. But Facebook, I guess, is okay. I don't know what's going on there. This morning, I listened to it, and it was clear. And in my headphones, it's clear. So I'm not sure if something's going on. Skype. Yeah, he says, we got a comment says, finally looking good here on Facebook. And it says, sound and video is better now. I can actually hear a baby in the background. Yes.
All right. Emmeline is making her debut on the internet. Not Absolutely. The debut, probably, but her next appearance. So it seems to be your upload bandwidth all the way around.
Oh, that's funny. So anyway, everybody, to my left, this way. Bill Davis from California.
I guess I should. Is this the right way, or am I flipped?
No, you're good. I don't know. I can't. I'm having enough trouble with my hands that are backwards.
Hi, everybody.
In my lower left, Alex Gallner from the UK. Then directly below, in the middle, is Brad Olson, off the tracks, and his beautiful baby daughter. And directly below me is Isaac T. We want to talk to him because he knows a lot about Taranis. What the heck did you do, Alex? You changed those little ones into big ones?
This is a Skype
put his Lego
filter.
Into grow shrink.
It's a Skype filter. You can use it to make your nose bigger, or maybe a piece of Legos bigger.
There you go. Awesome.
And I won't be able to fit this in my ear.
Awesome FCPX says, good morning, all. Glad to see everyone
What's up there,
healthy.
Ryan?
Absolutely. So we're going to be talking about we're not going to be talking about the virus that's going around. We're going to be talking about other things. Everybody can talk about that on their own time, and there's plenty of opportunities to do that. But it has affected people. Bill, you've worked from home for quite a while, right?
At least, well, okay, I've been working at home. I had a studio out back of my home for 10 years before, and then for the last 10 years or so, I've worked entirely on Final Cut Pro 10 from some version of home. So, yeah, I've done a lot of at-home delivery to clients of work.
And also, Brad.
I've worked at home for about... All right, pardon me.
No, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead. Absolutely, go ahead.
I've worked from home for about 18 or 19 years, so I'm kind of used to it. And my other half, she's worked from home from here at the same time for the last 3-4 years. So I'm quite used to it, and we're used to each other being at home together, which is
I
very
didn't realize
small thing.
I didn't realize you worked from home. I thought you worked in a studio sometimes. So work from home's great.
Absolutely.
And Brad, obviously, he has a daycare center when he's not editing.
I have the really bad idea of giving a toddler a Sharpie.
A permanent marker.
Yeah. She's insisting.
The play session that lasts for weeks.
I've been working from home for about a year, but it's not the first time, so probably won't be the last time.
And Isaac, what about you?
Not much has changed for me.
Isaac, what about you? Have you worked from home?
Yeah, I was hearing out Emmeline and her work from home experience, but yeah, roughly officially since 2012, but off and on for years.
So I didn't realize that when I invited everybody this morning, everybody here actually works from home. I didn't realize that. I wasn't thinking in those terms. I was just thinking who's available, to come on. And
we've been doing these chats in one form or another for how long, Richard? Like maybe 4 years. And then before that, I think we all chatted with each other on various other services. We had Google Hangouts and other things for 4 years before that. So I think you've got a subset here of the early adopters of I need to be able to communicate and or do client services stuff remotely. Right. So I think that's why we've all been in it for a long time. We're all situated for that.
And I have 2 studios here. I have one upstairs where I am now, and I have my recording studio that I'm resetting up downstairs with reel-to-reel decks. I've almost got them running again.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, just to offer it to clients. So we got a comment here.
Can you still get tape?
Yeah, Off the Tracks Daycare. We got a comment. Actually, they reformulated the tape. Anything that you had, including the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin and everybody else from like the late 1990s back, you cannot use that tape. You have to bake the tape for 8 hours at 130 degrees before you can play those tapes. I learned the hard way about 10 years ago. I messed up my deck, had to send it back to Tascam back in California.
Pancake reels of Ampex 456. Yes, I remember those days.
But they changed the formulation in the late 90s, and I have 6 of those reels that are unopened. I bought 6 at the time, unopened. So I don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to try it. So Tony says, howdy, everyone.
Tony Gallardo or another Tony?
Tony Gallardo. Felipe Baez says, Alex has been in quarantine for 18 years. Is that true, Alex?
Yes, that's right. But it's more about how the world has to be protected from me. That's how it went.
Exactly.
Nice. His beard is a disease vector.
Exactly. It's going to attack the microphone.
Who has looked at the specs for this new iPad, this amazing new iPad Pro that they just brought in? Anybody looked at the specs? I don't understand all of them.
I happened to be up early this morning, and there was something, a leaf fell in the backyard, so the dog, of course, had to pop up and investigate, woke me up, and so I happened to just thought, okay, why not? Let's check this feeds and see what's going on. And I saw it about 15 minutes after it released, and I read through a good number of the specs, but I don't feel like I'm got this locked down yet. I still have to spend more time with it, but it seems like they've done a pretty radical revision and update, and it's very interesting. There will be a lot of people, I would expect, when this all eventually shakes out, who will be using those kind of machines as their central focus of doing things. It was notable for those of us who work in the video industry that they announced with Filmic Pro and a pre-announcement of a new version of that set up to take advantage of the new capabilities of the new iPads. So that bodes pretty well for mobile editors and for people who maybe don't need all the capabilities as most of us do of full-time editing on a largest surface and a big laptop and a lot of high-speed stuff.
So when, I've been saying for a while, I expect there to be a touchscreen MacBook Pro. But this has come the opposite way, hasn't it? This, instead of a touchscreen iPad Pro, they're changing the iPad Pro into a MacBook kind of. They have a what do they call that? They have the keyboard. Magic keyboard. Yeah, trackpad.
Yeah.
So that means you don't have to touch the screen now. You can actually trackpad it like a laptop. I wasn't expecting this. This is like a reversal what I was expecting, but
And for me, the most interesting thing, just yesterday or the day before, I saw somebody post an image cap on Facebook of a new Asus machine. And what they have done is taken what on your computer would be the tire, on your laptop, your old laptop, the entire, and turn that into a second screen. It's like they put the little touch bar on steroids and made it big, and it's a second screen. So you've got your main monitor, you've got this secondary monitor, and then a keyboard below that. But my first thought was, oh my God, they've taken a trackpad, and that will not stand for me. Now, for mouse-based editors, that might be a real boon. I haven't used a mouse in 7-8 years now, so it's a non-starter for me. But it's interesting to see how the manufacturers are changing these configs.
So what is it says Apple unveils new iPad Pro with breakthrough LiDAR scanner and brings trackpad. What is that?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. Alex, you know what that is?
Well, you may have heard LiDAR when people are talking about automated driving. So it is essentially low resolution depth map, computer vision. So in other words, be able to tell when cars are on the street or people are walking on the sidewalk or about to cross in front. Then LiDAR will be able to tell the difference between a person and a tree that's 100 yards further behind them, because it'll actually be able to sense the distance. So this LiDAR detector will be able to detect up to 5 meters away from the iPad, both indoors and outdoors, how far things are away. Now, it's not really a full depth map. It's not every single pixel, its depth. It's much more that you will be able to sense some things in the distance of some things, and eventually maybe the resolution will be improved and we'll be able to get it down to higher resolution. So cameras may eventually have 2 resolutions. We'll have the visual pixel resolution, and then we may have the depth resolution, and we want the depth resolution to be as close as possible to the pixel resolution. The advantage of a high depth resolution is the fact that we can actually create a bit of parallax as we move from left to right, because effectively we know how far something is away, and if we move from left to right, then the display can actually follow where we are and actually follow our eyes, so we get a kind of 3D effect, if you want, without having any special kind of glasses, because it knows where your eyes are, and then it can actually modify what's on screen to simulate what kind of depth, and maybe slightly looking around things like that, which is quite strange, but it's kind of logical when it comes to these things. So yes, very exciting for people who want to capture 3D environments and get 3D models of things very quickly by just sweeping their iPad around a room or around an object and stuff like that. It's related to all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's good, isn't it? So the idea is, hopefully, Apple are trying to get people to look at, because the iPad app market never really took off the way that Apple probably wanted. We have the iPad Pro, but we don't really have too many Pro apps for it, because Apple probably didn't expect all apps to cost $1 when they set it up. Maybe they thought it would be $9.99 for consumer stuff, and maybe $49.99 for Pro stuff, and $2.99 for Pro stuff. But unfortunately, Apple, because of their App Store market, meant that the App Store never really took off for professional use. But maybe they're trying to get the hardware to pull the software. So now we have professional bits of hardware elements inside iPad Pros that'll maybe attract people to create pro-level software for it. And pros don't mind spending a few $100s on the app that actually pays their bills.
So do you think we're going to get Final Cut Pro on the iPad, this new iPad Pro?
I think the developer story is that if Apple do Final Cut Pro for the iPad, then it's not good necessarily for other Pro apps, because if you're a Pro app developer, you don't want to be Sherlocked. You don't want to establish a new aspect of a Pro app for the iPad and then have Apple come along and go, oh, okay, thanks very much for building all that up. Now we're going to create the Apple version. Well, we won't need to charge very much for it. We've got our brand recognition. So that's why Metal is demoed by Apple on the developer stage, and that's why these new iPads, the 2 iPad Pros of 2 different sizes, are being demoed using third-party apps, video editing apps. Yeah.
So Brad, you said no. What do you think? Why do you think no?
Well, I'm going to back up for just a second and say something about LiDAR, if I'm allowed to, by this kid.
Absolutely.
So my brother actually is a professor at Oregon State University in instructional engineering, and LiDAR is something he's been doing research. And when he was at San Diego, University of California, San Diego, they developed some of the very first mapping images onto point clouds from LiDAR scanning. So this has been an application for a long time. Obviously, the level of detail my brother needs when they go scan things in China or something after an earthquake is a lot higher than like Alex was mentioning with this iPad. It's much more, I think, about AR and that sort of thing. So I thought it was, I just texted my brother this morning. He was not an Apple fan. And I said, I guess I will get a LiDAR scanner after all, because he's been pointing out these LiDAR scanners that are affordable. But as far as Final Cut on the iPad, I don't think we'll get it soon. I think with the partnership with LumaFusion, I don't see the point in Apple necessarily taking that, and especially with the integration with the XML. You guys enjoying the singing as she... No, don't eat the Sharpie. Both have got to clean that up. So.
Can I have the Sharpie? Can I have the Sharpie?
One of the things that was in that demonstration that I watched through the videos there, and it was interesting. They were using, my nephew's wife is a physical therapist, doctor in the physical therapy realm. And she and I had a big conversation the last time we were together about the use of this stuff in physical therapy. And I'm going to suspect that this will be a boon to things like physical motion studies and stuff like that for telemedicine. And, it's been in the news a lot right now that telemedicine has to go as far and as fast as it can so that we can offload the doctor's waiting rooms. So hopefully this is another step in that direction. Baby steps, but baby steps are where you start.
Well, I know one interesting application that might even be made better, since you brought it up, Bill, is there's Matt Kubota, MATTKUBOTA, and they have released an app for people that are suffering from coronavirus and are ventilator dependent, and it does head tracking so that they can communicate with their healthcare providers, their family members, etc. So maybe that might be. I know LiDAR may not be the application for that, but maybe this new iPad Pro will facilitate that to a better degree.
Undoubtedly, your devices are reaching out more around you to your space rather than just being a flat surface that sits there and waits for you to interact with it. So the fact that you can switch it so that it, what we're doing now, we're taking flat screens, and through the combination of a camera and microphone array and the rest of that, it has revolutionized telephony. What's the
telephony?
Yeah,
telephony. Sure.
Telephony, yeah. And so it's already done that, and it kind of grew up without any of us really thinking about it or without anybody making a big deal. Yeah. It's just, you started using it a little bit, then you used it more and more, and suddenly now, here we are.
Yeah, Ryan just said it'd be huge for AR, of course. So
right.
I think that's the way they're headed. So one of the things that I did recently is I am now a ham radio operator, KC3R TV, just in time, right, for the pandemic.
There you go.
Just by whatever intuition, I was a ham radio operator when I was a teenager. Not a teenager, when I was in grade school. And I never renewed my license, but I just renewed it as I said I'm going to get it, and I got it, and I'm on the air. KC3RTV. RTV like Richard Taylor TV.
Cool. Some of those old things may have to have a coming back. I know my sister's in a high-rise in San Francisco. Hope you're all well there. And she's the kind of the coordinator. She sits on the board of the co-op, and they had for the last 2 or 3 years the condos, those big high rises, interface with the fire department and the rest of those about how they're going to interact with society in terms of big emergencies. Now they're thinking mostly quake in San Francisco, obviously, right. And that was the main structure of that. But if everything goes down, the power grid goes down, the phones go down, and everything else, and so people have been working on this stuff for a long time. There's a lot of stuff in place, I think, that people don't understand.
Well, the thing about of course, ham radio operators, you don't need internet, you don't need power, everything's battery powered.
Right.
We are the transmitter. I transmit myself. The only time this would be ineffective is if the UFOs came down and did a blocking, they blocked us. Otherwise, we can
the EMP pulse will get your battery chargers.
Exactly. We broadcast ourselves, so we can broadcast regardless of internet, regardless of power, even. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, Richard, do you think my time is shrinking? Could we shift to remote workflows?
Yes.
Would that be
okay? Absolutely. Isaac, you go ahead. You start.
Okay. Yeah. So here's some resources for anybody who might be watching or listening right now that I think would be really helpful. Pro Video Coalition, Scott Simmons, and Michael Camus with Bebop Technology. They did a podcast, and if you look, it's right there right now, provideocoalition.com, on remote editing workflows. And, like Michael says, it's all killer, no filler. So I think that's worth a listen. Worth a read for sure. I'm just really blown away by it is Sophie Marshall. So SOFI Marshall, 2 L's at the end.com. She published on March 10th an article called "The Ultimate Real-Time Remote Editing Workflow That Won't Break the Bank." And I think it is
perfect timing. Yeah.
And it's just it really is an excellent read. She acknowledges that it's big, and so she's done all the hard work of trying to break it out into chapters and sections. And since then, because of our current circumstance, this was all geared toward specifically a Mac user using Premiere Pro, but you could easily see where this could fit in with Final Cut Pro, with Resolve, with Avid Media Composer. And more feedback is coming at the end of this article. If you've read it already, revisit it. That shows instead of using Blackmagic's web presenter hardware,
right?
Because I should probably say the premise behind this article is, so you're an editor and typically you'd have a director in the room, or if you have a client or a producer that you're trying to screen this to. Now that we are where we are, how do you make that happen? And it's just a really, really clever way of replicating what was once in Final Cut Pro, iChat Theater, so that someone.
I remember that. I remember iChat Theater. Yeah.
Which is funny because when I started with Final Cut Pro 10, I was like, oh, I remember Final Cut Pro has this iChat Theater. I'm so pumped. And of course, it's not in 10. But for somebody to come up with this, and someone mentioned this yesterday, that it might feel that a little bit over engineered, and then said in the next sentence, but I do have lag with these other approaches. That's the difference. So this approach is least latency for this approach. And,
right.
And that's, again, that's you playing back something and getting real-time feedback from someone over a video chat session just like this. So super huge article that would be worth reading there. And then there's, in our realm with Final Cut Pro, I have it on good authority that PostLab is working on some pretty sweet stuff right now to expand capabilities of collaboration among Final Cut Pro 10. But then you may have caught this too in their Twitter account. Premiere Pro is coming too.
Right.
And I know that it exists right now, in some form for Premiere users in terms of for teams or even productions. But I think what PostLab has in mind is even might fit that bill even a bit more. So there's some really helpful stuff. And then, man, I got one last one. Sorry. So Frame.io, they just announced that they would be expanding storage for certain users, and now I don't want to get it wrong. We're extending a free 2 terabyte storage boost to all our customers. Storage will be active for 90 days. And oh man, I mean, if you're a Frame.io customer, that's huge. And if you're not, give it a try because it's pretty sweet.
Have you actually done editing on the cloud? I haven't actually done it. I know how it's done. Brad and I, we've been working off the tracks. We used Frame.io to just, sync things up and do comments and stuff. But I haven't done any actual editing in the cloud. Has
so when you
anybody
say
here done that?
you'd have to clarify what that means to.
I thought
to
Bebop
Richard.
did. I thought Bebop did actual editing in the cloud. You can edit with video in the cloud itself.
Yeah. So Michael, I hope I got this right. So with Bebop, what you're doing is you're accessing a device where you actually can see Premiere in this remote space or Media Composer in this remote space, and then edit from there. Which that's kind of the dream for a lot of people when they're not on site. And Sophie comments on that. That means though that those assets have to be available though in Bebop's cloud. So again, Michael, I hope I got that right. I'll go back and re-listen or reread if I need to.
No,
so
that's what
one
I
way
thought.
of editing in the cloud. Yeah, and he had a precursor talk to a PC over IP at the Faster Together stage a couple years back. So that's kind of like the prelude for what he was actually working on. But what we're talking about is probably like, okay, either review and approval through Frame.io,
right.
or even possibly using like a cloud storage as the place where you store your assets, and then actually edit, off of those proxies or those full res, right?
And also a place.
So I feel like I have to jump in here because.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, these are all excellent solutions, and I highly recommend that if you're in that circumstance where you're a professional editor and you're displaced from your suite and you have the infrastructure wherever you are going to be spending your time to interface with these, you should please definitely look up all this thing. I do think there are a lot of editors who don't have the luxury of these kind of things. They may not have high-speed internet to their house. They may not be a room there. I mean, somebody was interesting. They posted a whole bunch of pictures about corporate workers who had to go home and work from home, and they were with laptops on ironing boards. They literally barely had a desk to function from. So there's going to be a lot of people for whom these kind of higher end solutions don't work. And I just want to toss out a little bit of hope for those kind of people. It does not have to be this complicated. Yes, there will be a quality hit. You're not going to get the experience you had of somebody sitting over your shoulder being able to see your primary screen while you edit. But even something as simple as an iDevice, and literally, if you take your phone and put it on an arm and mount it so it can see the screen and everybody can, it's actually not horrible. You can actually see, let me get it dropped around. You can actually see interface stuff well enough to communicate with a client, right? The cost is zero. You've already got FaceTime. I'm saying in a pinch, if you desperately need to get projects put forward, these infrastructure things are fine, but they're not the way to do things. And some people are going to just need to get the jobs done, and they were sent home. And so look at the complicated stuff. Also look at simple things that you can do right now with no investment of either time or money on increasing whatever infrastructure you have right now.
No, for sure. And like you said, a lot of people are, because on the IT side of life with fixed consulting, and by the way, I had a bit of an eye roll moment just a second ago, and that was at my neighbors who are mowing. They love to mow, so you might hear that in the microphone.
Do they?
I'm like now, like right now.
Do they have the N95 face mask?
We're all going, is that? Yeah, we're all going. Is that me? Is there something for?
No. That was not directed at anybody here on this.
I use those face masks, the N95s, when I mow grass for dust and stuff. I have a box of them out there.
Oh, so nothing like
anyway, I just think there are simple ways for most people that you can offload some of your work tasks without having to spend a large amount of money or make things. So just get familiar with the capabilities you already have. There are multiple levels. There are multiple levels here.
No, for sure.
So so Isaac, you have anything else before you go? I know you have to leave. Anything else before you? I'll give you the stage.
Yeah. So I'd say last thing I wanted to mention was, people are trying to figure out, either with taking events that are going to, and that I know that was on the agenda here, taking events from, how do we do that effectively from live to this? I think there's some really, really great ideas out there. I'm not going to use the word like virtual, because what you're hoping for is that, I mean, the reality of it is it's an enterprise. I mean, it's a collective enterprise. Everybody's coming together because yes, to talk about ideas, yes, to talk about new products, but again, products or services. And at the end, someone, hopefully, there's a fit there and there's a problem solved, and then money exchanges hands. So, but we want that, we want that community. And how do you make that even more accessible? Can you do that with, like something like Simon says, with taking your content and having it subtitled for multiple language groups? Or, do you take that content, and have it transcribed for the sake of you being able to reference it later in your MAM or your editor? So, between those two things, being able to make content more accessible, and then how to make these experiences, these events more feel like this, although we're not, feel like this, but then in addition to that, move beyond that and give people, again, value for the time that they're spending at these moments. So with that, gents, I'm really sorry, but I got to break off. Hey, Richard, I appreciate the invite.
No
Bill,
problem.
Alex, good to see you.
Great to see you.
Yes. Greetings to Bradley and Emmeline when they come back. All right.
Yeah, they'll be back.
All right. Be safe, guys. We'll see ya.
Bye.
So Alex, what's going on in the UK right now? Is it like everywhere else? It's a kind of
yeah, I mean, some of the people who I work with who would usually be in an office are working from home. Kind of is what's going on.
Okay. Have you been out? Have you been out and about in London and stuff, or?
Yeah, no, I go for walks in the morning anyway.
Okay.
So if you do you really want to talk about all that?
Well, just no. I don't want to get involved in the actual. Everybody can get the virus information from someplace else. Just the general attitude. I mean, are people just staying inside and stuff? Because we don't have access to the UK. We have access, of course, to the United States. So I'm wondering if it's the same.
Well, there are people wandering around the streets. There's not. I don't think that, I go for walks in the morning from, 7 until 9 or something like that.
Okay.
And so I'm seeing people commuting, seeing people out and about. There's a bit less traffic than normal, but I'm on a very main road. So I see that there's main roads anyway. But generally the big supermarkets have got there's a few gaps in their shelves, but if you go to neighborhood stores, they've all got everything. The stores are a little bit more busy on Wednesday morning after the government kind of changed their policy a little bit. So I think in order to handle that, people think, well, I need to do something, and the first thing they think of is to go shopping. So they went shopping on the Wednesday morning, but on Tuesday morning after the announcement on Monday. But yeah, essentially, I think the thing is that we have a very different healthcare system here, so it's a very different prospect of what's going on. And I think, I'm tempted to go into lots of policy stuff, but let's not talk about that.
Yeah, we don't have to do that right now. So I'm just curious. I was just curious. I mean, I've been to London a bunch of times. I stayed in Sloane Square, and I stayed in Chelsea, and I always loved it. I always liked it when I flew into Heathrow, I guess it was. Yeah.
So I mean, I walked down to a park called Regent's Park today, and there were people walking around, and the advice is that even people over 70 who essentially from Friday onwards, they have to stay indoors for the next 12 weeks. So the good thing is that, they're talking about some real proper timescales here at the moment, which is very clear. So they're just talking about 12 weeks of people over 70 staying at home and being socially isolated. It's supposed to, from now on, and then some people may think that means 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or
right.
Everything will be okay by May. So they're being very clear about this time scale for all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But there are people around, and the advice is that people should also go out and exercise as long as they don't get too close to other people. So
right.
It's not like France, in which you will be fined if you're outdoors, which is currently what they're doing, and not like other countries where you have to have a piece of paper explaining why you're outside, which we may get to in a week or so's time, but that's not what we're doing at the moment.
So you said you work from home. Have you seen work go down or go up, or about the same?
It's the kind of work I do, it's, I'm now making plugins for broadcasters and social media plugins and stuff like that for people who use Final Cut.
Okay.
So I'm not spending much time doing editing, although I'm doing some editing at the moment, getting back to it. And it's so seasonal and so random throughout my year anyway that it's no different. So I kind of have to allow for the fact that I may not have the income for a few weeks at a time or sometimes longer, because that's the freelance life. You know, you sometimes say, this is the last piece of work I know I'll ever have, which is sometimes the work you're doing. I do have some regular gigs or regular things that happen every year, but one of those went earlier this year, and so that suddenly goes. So these things are never confirmed until they're confirmed. So you expect, even though you've done it for 8 years or 15 years, it may suddenly not happen, and that's okay. Right.
So I was looking back on my timeline, and I think it was 5 years ago. I was working down at the National Archives. I met Prince Charles. He was down there. I'm not sure what he was doing at the National Archives. I don't remember. He was visiting, because usually we do politicians and stuff, but usually from the U.S. So I'm not sure what he was doing there, if he had a book out or something like that. I can't remember, but I got to meet him. It was really cool. I really enjoyed that.
I don't know if you know this thing, that what we in the UK think about, the thing about the royal family is they think the world smells of paint. Have you heard this before?
No.
Because everywhere they go, they've just painted it to make it nice.
Oh, yeah, okay, gotcha.
So especially the Queen.
Gotcha.
Oh, we have to make this place nice. We have to paint these walls. And so everywhere she goes is like, yep, this is the way the world smells.
Yes, she's coming.
I can guarantee you the National Archives did not do any painting when he was there. But we were instructed. We had to listen. Everybody was in this room, and the press was there. I was doing AV support at the time for live events, and they instructed us about not reaching out to shake his hand and these other things. He didn't say that, but his handlers or whatever told us to do that.
Yeah, I guess you get a briefing in advance. But then what the members of the royal family do is they try and get you to relax once, because you're all keyed up to talk to them, and then they just say a couple of things which they've said to, which they're used to doing, getting people to calm down and relax.
Sure.
Because that's what they've been doing for decades. Yeah. So hopefully the experience wasn't too painful for you.
So no, not at all. I really enjoyed it. So how is I'm presuming all the video production, is come to a halt.
So TV shows, regular TV shows, and actual production, which I just see as prep for the real actual making of the show.
Right.
So the preparation, the getting of the ingredients before editors actually start making stuff. That is now being closed down the last few days. Like there's a regular evening soap opera. Soap operas are now going to, instead of 4 episodes a week, they're going for 2 or less, and so that because they can't film them anymore, because it's not practical. Sets don't work that way.
I've seen the usual dip, but it's been an interesting dip just for about 3 or 4 days, because I do corporate work, so I'm a corporate communicator basically. So that's what I do. And all of the shops, the larger shops that I work with, for 3 or 4 or 5 days, they were very quiet because they were figuring out what to do. Now, most of the executive teams are working from home, so our calls are increasing as they try to figure out a corporate communications strategy, either with the public or with their business-to-business teams and vendors, as to what's going to happen next. So the amount of work is actually starting to increase again. And I think this has to do with how successfully you can virtually produce work now. If the kind of work you did was like what Alex is talking about, it's a TV show and you need that big crew and those big cameras out there to get things done, then the content is not going to be coming in for you to work on as an editor to send out to the public. If you're a more corporate communications type, there is an opportunity here, I think, for people if you have relationships into those kind of firms. And to me, what seems to be the most important is an end-to-end workflow that's solid and proven. And probably for the past year or two, I would say 50% of our work is not shot. It relies on stock video and other things. And we have bulk rate subscriptions with some of the larger stock houses. And so our cost of being able to create an informational video that looks like that looks like the company wants it to look, because it has a certain polish to it. I think that's going to continue because they have more and more things. I will say one aspect of it that's been surprising is that they want things to look a little bit less expensive now. Where used to be that you went in and you shot the CEO and you lit him perfectly, or her, and you made sure that everything was just right so that they looked appropriate to the statue of their office. Now, literally having them shoot something on iPhone and send it to you and inserting that is not only acceptable, it's almost better. It says that we're all in this together. I'm not doing things from the corporate tower anymore. I'm doing things from home the same way you are. And so if you have that kind of infrastructure in place, I think you're in great shape for this, if you can successfully let people know you have those capabilities. If you haven't got those structures in place, I would spend some time thinking about if this is going to be around for a while, and if you have clients that can do some things. Let's say you've got a client that's selling things direct on the internet. What becomes critically important for you is an end-to-end workflow where they can give you the problem that they're facing. This particular item isn't selling as much as I'd like, and I think it's an appropriate item. And it's not we're not selling jet skis and nobody's going to be going out jet skiing.
Right.
Product that actually has market right now, to be able to agilely and quickly create a communications piece that can solve that problem. I'm product off correctly and deploy it out into the web in such a way that it can do that client some good. Now that presumes that they have a certain infrastructure in place. I mean, do they have a website? Do their customers know how to get to their website? What percentage of their business is done online already? A whole bunch of stuff that goes in there. But at that point, all of a sudden, you're working in parallel streams. You're becoming not just the bring in the content, edit the piece, and distribute the piece to the client, but they're going to be looking, I think, for expertise on how do I put that into a stance that can be accessed by a wider customer base and can actually drive e-commerce results, because that is going to be more important. And there are lots of ways to do that, which we can talk about if anybody wants to, but I'm just saying that the game has changed a little bit. If we're all in little pods, the more you can do in your pod, the more effective you can be, not just on the production end, but on the distribution end and on the plumbing into accessibility for homebound people, the better off you're going to be.
Brad, what are you up to?
Hold on. I had to unmute there for a second. Right now, I was just synchronizing dailies from a 2-week feature shoot that's wrapping up this week. The crew's small enough that I guess they're getting away with not canceling production. So I was running it through Sync and Link and Shot Notes X, if anybody wants to know how that
You doing that on
works.
Premiere?
Not this job. I don't hate myself that much.
So I
laugh, but I am working another job in Premiere.
No, I know you do.
I absolutely dread it.
So I had Stephen Moyer on last week, and that was a great interview. He was talking all about Final Cut Pro in Hollywood and in LA and stuff. And there
were a lot of crickets. No.
No, I mean I
shouldn't say that. I'm the off the tracks guy.
Yeah, well, he was talking about the Banker, the movie The Banker that they did in Final Cut and stuff, and he inherited that. He didn't start with it from the very beginning. That's how he got a hold of that. And
Kevin was on it.
Kevin Bailey, right?
He went back to work for Apple, and they found Stephen Moyer. I think Patrick said he recommended him for the job.
So the producer actually started on Final Cut Pro on The Banker. I thought maybe Stephen did, but not the case. It was already well underway.
I think the articles and the things I've read is that the editor had to learn it. So
yeah,
good times. But it worked, and it was a film-based workflow, which is interesting.
Yes.
Final Cut wasn't really built for film-based workflows. I think Alex can speak to at least didn't you have to come up with a foot and frame counter for Final Cut for focus or something?
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, it's more that they wanted to do some handovers to the sound department, and the sound department like their
sound department hadn't updated
frames
since 1972 or something.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. They like to be the feet and frames. Yeah, I did that for them. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I remember I helped. I gave some feedback to Thomas Grove Carter doing the long time ago when he was doing that interactive commercial from Day and Night, in which you could press a key on the keyboard.
And it was the other side.
And it was flip between the day and night of exactly the same sequence, and then that was done on film, and they did that using compound clips effectively, and they put the video tap stuff into. They used all video taps, edited off of the video tap, and then the assistant, just when they got the final digitization from the off the celluloid, they just replaced the video tap low res stuff with the actual full res stuff, and the edit was already conformed because they'd already done it with compound clips. So that was a long time ago. So weirdly enough, it's not actually that hard. I mean, at the moment I'm doing a rather silly edit at the moment where I kind of, with the client, don't want to do any color grading or any good quality color. So what I'm doing is I actually there was just a single shot, a single camera, people being interviewed throughout a day. And then for each person, I got all the clips and made a one-angle multicam clip. So then I could edit away with that, do whatever I want with that multicam clip, and then later on when I want to grade it, I'll just grade the multicam clip, and everything will just be regraded, whatever edits that I do. So I mean, it's rather old-fashioned from my point of view, a way of editing, but that's the way I remember doing it with compound clips back in 2011 and 2012, in which you do that. But I haven't done real edits for a while. And also that means I could fix the sound in all the clips if necessary, just by creating a new multicam angle, and then on the new angle have the fixed sound that I've got, and then just choose that as a separate angle. But so it's a bit weird. But yeah, of course Final Cut isn't inherently built around this kind of flexible job-specific proxy workflows, which is another way of looking at what this would be. Although I think if the next version of Final Cut requires Catalina, then they have the advantage of having maybe using a different proxy codec, because H.265 can do transparency.
Oh, it can.
H.265 can do transparency, which means that you could, with all your graphics and everything, could have transparency proxies. And then you've got kind of cloud-based editing and iPad editing, because effectively the iPad or the Mac or wherever it is, even with low-res proxies, it will still actually have alpha in them, which is pretty cool.
Steve Martin actually just posted a video experimenting with proxies and HEVC proxy workflow in Final Cut. So on Ripple Training.
Yeah, so go to YouTube and Ripple Training. It's a new video today.
Absolutely. I started watching that this morning. So I'm curious about what kind of resolution is that video tap put out? I'm always curious about that.
Horrible.
Crap.
Horrible.
Even in 2020?
Oh, yeah.
It's the same
They
technology
didn't update it. Yeah, they didn't update it because what's the point? They put a little tiny chip, I think it's in the viewfinder.
Okay.
They actually put it, and it's tapped out of that.
Used
It's
to be
like
a beat
the
splitter
lowest.
mirror and a video camera hung off like a limpet from the side of the motion camera, and you would get these god-awful, grainy, black and white, flickery things, and that was your video tap. And I don't think it's gone much different than that.
But I've been told there's no incentive to upgrade it because you got real digital cinema cameras if you're shooting on film, and no one cares.
Okay.
I mean, the main danger of those video taps is they're different frame rates sometimes. So sometimes your video tip actually may be recording it at some random frame rate or NTSC, and you're doing it 25 frames a second. But still, Final Cut can actually handle multiple frame rate compound clips. So it's actually not great. So you may have to slip things a few frames at a time when you do your final conform, but still you can still deal with workflows with different frame rates. Now, of course, if eventually Final Cut does have a customizable proxy workflow, it would be very nice if it wasn't locked into a particular frame rate, although that's rather unlikely.
Hard to work that math out with
that both elates me and scares me to death, because that means we're going to get now, why the heck did you choose this frame rate for your proxies? You'll get these files in there, and you're going to go, that makes no sense at all. I can't work with that.
Yeah, because you'll get 18 frames a second. You'll just go, well, why?
Exactly.
Yeah. 12 and a half is better. in the PAL world, 12.5 is a lot better than 18. Let's face it.
Sure, half of 24, that makes perfect sense. 18, 11.6. Divisible by nothing in the universe.
So it seems like a more advanced proxy workflow is a no-brainer for 10.5, don't you think? I mean, after all this time.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Resolution, relinking of proxies at least. Different, choose resolution,
I'll tell you, on this project I'm currently working on, I was a little concerned that I might have to make proxies or figure out some de-squeezing, because they're shooting on these 2x anamorphic lenses on a Alexa Mini with it's like 2.8K by 2160. So the height is 4K, but it's like a 4:3 frame. And then when you shoot in ProRes, for some reason, Ari decided it was better for the compression to have a slightly wider frame. So there's these weird black strips on the side of the ProRes files. But what's fascinating is that Ari flags this. There's metadata that flags it as anamorphic and what kind of anamorphic it is. Also, you've got the flag for the Rec 709 LUT. So when you open it in QuickTime, you don't see the black frames. You don't see it delogged, but you don't see the black frames. Final Cut will show you the black sides, but it automatically de-squeezes it, which means I didn't have to do any conformity de-squeezing myself or any transcoding of proxies, which I really wanted to avoid. So that made my life easier. And then Sync and Link inherits that resolution, and somehow it's reading the anamorphic thing too. So after I run it through Sync and Link, it stays the same frame size and it's de-squeezed. And well, actually let's see. Yeah. So it's like a weird 2944 by 2160, but it's an anamorphic frame. And I haven't had any issues with this footage at all. So that makes me happy.
They knew it was going to run on a computer, and the computer could do a lot of math in advance.
Right.
That's right. But, I was looking up videos beforehand and I asked the DP, can you send me a test clip? He's like, nope. I'm like, thanks. so it was like day one. He originally wanted to shoot Ari Raw, and I was like, nope. And she was kind of bummed about that, but I was like, I'm sorry, but this is so low budget, I don't have time to transcode or store Ari Raw.
So 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago at NAB, Apple introduced ProRes RAW? Was it 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
I think it was 2 years ago.
You think there's going to be any update announcement around when this Ghost NAB is happening in April? For ProRes?
I think there will. I think it'll be quiet until Red's patent expires, and then we'll get some noise.
Huh.
I mean, the alternative is that Red and Apple are playing nice with each other because they kind of need each other a little bit.
Right.
So Red would benefit a lot, and Apple would benefit a lot if there was an afterburner playback kind of driver for the afterburner, which could deal with Red RAW. And Apple would benefit because they'll sell their Macs, and Red would benefit from not being kind of superseded by more recent codecs and stuff like that. So I think they'll play with each other. I mean, not to the extent that I think that Red will let Apple have ProRes RAW on the iPhone, which will be actually a very good idea, and for the iPad, but we'll see. I think that's what I'm expecting kind of from the April announcements, if they make them to do with what Apple would have said or would have announced. Where in fact Apple wouldn't have announced it. It would be, Red saying, if you have an afterburner card, it's twice as fast, or if you've got maybe even Blackmagic as well, because they want to sell their other hardware, and they don't actually mind Apple putting a card in there. And as you may have seen in the news today, that you can now get an afterburner card separately. You don't actually have to have it built into your new Mac Pro. So see what other things.
Yeah, they're about $2,000, right? The afterburner cards.
I think so. Yeah.
But the red card the red card is like $6,000, so it seems like a bargain.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Red. Obviously, lots of companies are hardware companies.
Right.
So, I think Red may have to let go of that, of some card, of having to make their cards. They'll just advise people use afterburner cards, but then they'll make the money on their actual camera hardware, I guess.
So I'm going to be curious to see who develops another type of an afterburner card that fits in that same slot on the Mac Pro. Whether Red does one or Ari does one or whoever. I mean, it's pretty open. It's not going to just be the afterburner card, do you think? That's the only one we're going to get? It's got to be some other ones that are in development.
My concern, Richard, is, okay, so we've got ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW as the two leading contenders. I'm sure each of them thought that by being robust and out there first, it would come to market dominance. And I'm wondering if the actual result of those two decisions was that everybody just said, I'm going to wait. I know very few people, I know zero clients and very few people who are working in a raw workflow in video today. And it's been 2 years since this stuff has been widely available. Well, a year and a half.
Right.
And so I think they made it's not a miscalculation. I mean, developing the technology was super smart. And now that they own it and they have the patents and all the rest of that. But that stuff is only valuable if people are buying the technology and it's driving bottom line results. And I don't see it doing that yet. I still think it's an anomaly, not a standard or anything close to it. And I don't think people are building libraries of ProRes RAW or Black footage by intent.
Well, didn't Pond 5 say they were doing like a ProRes RAW and they have a Red RAW library? I don't know how much content's on there, but they announced it at least.
It's easy for a shop like that to buy the camera and record it in that. I'm on Shutterstock and N5 and all those things all the time because we do a lot of work with them. Again, we have bulk purchasing agreements in place, and I never go to it because that's not interesting in my workflow. My clients want web delivery of things that large bodies of employees can get access to now. And the fact that it was raw versus well shot and well graded imagery makes 0.00 difference to the clients.
But I wasn't even talking about just ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW, but other things, H.265 acceleration.
Yeah, they all have absolute business class importance to, but I don't think those niches are where we're going right now. Serving the niche doesn't get you, I mean, if you come back and you have overexposed windows, there's nothing better for the editor than it's just going to see a good shot at the end of it. And if you've done it that way or putting ND on the windows or any, I'm not saying you should do it the old-fashioned way just for the sake of that. These are great capabilities. I love them. But I just don't think that it's the communications key here. Maybe it is for bespoke workflows. I don't do movies. So, maybe having that available is important, but it doesn't seem like it.
Well, I mean, for indie films, Blackmagic RAW, there's a film I helped run through post that was all shot Blackmagic RAW. So it's just kind of where you're at. I can't see the day-to-day corporate world or web world wanting to deal with that extra step.
And yet that's where the money is. That's where people are being hired right now. Because you're not going to be hired to go out on a film set because they're shutting down.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So the afterburner card. Go ahead, Alex.
Well, the thing is that there's two kinds of accelerator card that we're kind of talking about here. We've got the GPU style accelerator card, and the red card is a bit like the Radius Rocket from the mid-90s. It's essentially a thing to, that was a CPU card actually, as well as a GPU card. So there's CPU cards, GPU cards. In this case, we've got field programmable gate arrays. And so the afterburner card is not a fast CPU or GPU. What it is getting an algorithm, a method of doing something, such as making QuickTime work using various codecs, and turning that into virtual circuitry. And if it's virtual circuitry, it's a lot faster than code. Because what you're doing with a field programmable gate array is you say, hey, all you transistors, line up this way right now. And then we push a load of pixels through you. You automatically produce these different codecs, these different outputs. So what you're doing is creating as if you had a special hardware implementation of a codec or an algorithm or something like that, which is pretty different from what a GPU is doing, which is all about shaders and matrices and combining 17 commands into a single command. So it doesn't actually take any more to do one more command because it's all being combined together with math. So yes, there's no particular reason for anybody else can create a field programmable gate array card for the Mac Pro or for PCs, and they could put any algorithm on it. It could be doing protein folding or vaccine research or whatever you want to do with this stuff. Maybe DNA sequencing. You get the algorithm, you get the method, and you turn it into virtual hardware, and it can be switched every few minutes depending on, or a few seconds, depending on what app is actually running. So that's what the accelerator card is. So really, I imagine there may be some cross-platform ones that will run on the new Mac Pro and also on other hardware. I would guess maybe the hardware that runs other GPU architectures like AMD.
Okay.
Really depends on what Apple do next.
So one of the things I want to mention, speaking of that, the MPX modules in the Mac Pro are stunningly brilliant. Not only for the Afterburner card, that's not really an MPX module, but the GPUs and stuff, no fans, no cables. Every time I see somebody using a third party or a non-standard GPU, it's got like 2 or 3 fans on it. It's like, I don't want any fans inside the Mac Pro. I just want the GPX module, which is a giant heatsink. You just plug it in, no cables to hook up. So if anybody utilizes the MPX module, that's fantastic. I guess this Afterburner is not really a GPX module, but it seems like the same kind of a thing. It's just no cables, no fans. You just plug it in and it just works. So that design, whoever designed that is brilliant as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and also the good thing about the modules is that if you have more than one GPU card in them, you can create your own interconnects between them, which are a lot faster than the PCI bus.
So
even though the PCI bus, the PCI bus is not the fastest PCI bus you can get in the new Mac Pro, but I don't know, whatever you call it, the fiber channel
Infinity Fabric. I think
Infinity Fabric. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so that means you can get you can share graphics operations between the GPUs a lot faster and deal with edge conditions and stuff like that, and farm off lots of stuff over to the whole module. So that's very powerful. Because the thing is, that essentially GPU card cooling systems are fighting the cooling system or whatever PC they're in, and they assume the PC is going to have its own cooling system, and then they can't control where the airflows are going and stuff like that. And Apple is saying, why fight? We've actually got a really good cooling system for our computer, so don't put any fans in here. Of course, you can have a fan-based card and stick it in there for PC for a cross-platform thing, but the idea is let the computer environment do it and give the card a lot more power and take the fan off it.
Right. So the fans are virtually silent, and I learned that one of the ways they do that is because the fans never operate at the same RPMs. 3 fans. They never operate on the same RPMs. They're always different RPMs. And that's one of the ways they keep it quiet. Now, one thing about it, though, it does throw off a lot of heat. I'm holding my hand over there right now, and I can feel the heat. Now, in the wintertime, that's fine. But in the summertime, I don't know if I'm going to be too pleased with that. I'll have to put a separate air conditioning unit in here.
Update your HVAC system.
Well, I have a good...
Richard, have you had any issues with not enough power draw for the Mac Pro? I've heard of that being an issue for some people.
Well, here I have it on a separate circuit. So I checked into, listen, I haven't done math since high school and college. But when I got my ham radio license, I had to start doing fractions and worried about amps versus volts versus ohms, and I did all that, and I figured out what the Mac Pro needs, which is about 1,200 watts, 1,300 watts, something like that. And since our circuits are 15 amps and 120 volts, the one circuit by itself is fine for the Mac Pro. That's
basically a hairdryer,
right?
Running all the time,
right? Yeah. So I have that figured out. I have 2 circuits in the studio upstairs here. I have 2. I went back, turned the circuit breakers off. I had my girlfriend, which she was in here. And I was at circuit breaker box on the phone, and I said, what turned off? And she said, this turned off. I said, okay, what? And we figured out the one outlet by the door is just by itself, so I use that for the Mac Pro. So Tony Oddjobs.
I gotta sneak off pretty soon. I got a ping from in the house that I got a client.
No, you don't. You stay right here. So. They can wait. Tony,
it's been fun chatting with everybody. Let's do this again. I already had a couple people.
We're going to try to do one for NAB if people are making announcements that week. I presume Black Magic is going to make an announcement. But Tony Oddjobs says, I love Off the Tracks poster. So.
Oh, thank you. Oh, the poster.
My suspicion about NAB is that that a lot of companies, just generally across the world, who are going to exhibit at NAB have been doing their Gantt and PERT charts towards getting everything ready for exposure that week. So I suspect we will see announcements that week that will be interesting to a wider audience. So, yeah, I'm up. I was talking to Richard earlier about a week ago about the fact that I thought we should probably do more of these right around what would have been the NAB week in order to see what comes down the pike from these companies and what we can turn around and help people understand.
Alex, do you have anything coming out?
No, I don't. Although, of course, that is a thing that I could turn to for income, I suppose, if I wanted to make stuff that people will find useful, I suppose. But no, in terms of us getting back together or what we could talk about, it could be that there may be some more press releases from Apple this week, because instead of a press event that they would have done towards the end of March. So maybe there'll be an iMac refresh in the next day or two, or
iMac
just a
Pro
feature bump or something like that.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
They have a tendency to do these, like you said, sometimes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They'll start and they'll do multiple days. So the heck with that. I want Final Cut Pro 10.5.
But we should also pay attention to the fact that they probably did the new iMac Pro because they had enough in the supply chain that's close enough to being sellable in the U.S. Remember, there's going to be a lot of disruption of those shipping containers coming out of China where most of this stuff is made. And so there will be a dip. I was talking to somebody here on the West Coast who works kind of vaguely around shipping, and they had a long downturn for a long time, and they're not expecting the shipments from the rest of the world to come back up to normal for quite a while.
Okay.
The new Magic keyboard for the iPad Pros is coming to the US and other countries in May,
right?
But to Europe sometime in the future. We don't know when. So Apple are makes it just a little bit more desirable for the US folks to get something that they know the rest of the world can't have. Maybe, I don't know. It's interesting.
The Mac Pro is made in Austin, Texas, for the US customers. So that's not affected. And the parts are from a bunch of different places in the U.S. as well. So,
again, sorry, everybody, but I got to bow out.
See you, Bill.
Time to go make some money. Take care, everybody. See you all next time.
Okay, we're going to head out anyway. So thank you very much, Alex. We'll get you back for NAB. I'll send you out a message whenever I get figure out when we're going to do. I mean, I'm sure Black Magic is going to be doing something first thing Monday morning, or you think, or... I would presume.
Yeah, I think they'll have people. Everyone will be looking to them for providing some sort of interesting Grant Pretty presentation from somewhere in Australia. Him stuttering through cool stuff that he wants to talk about. Yeah.
So they'll have a Resolve 17 or 16.5, and maybe a new camera, perhaps.
Oh, they just released 16.2 with some interesting little updates for Fairlight, but it's possible. They
did that last year too, though. They had an update right before NAB, then they came out with 17 or 16, whatever it was.
Oh, it was the beta of 16.
Right. That's what I mean. Yeah.
So yeah, that would make sense.
And then Sony has announcements. They've pre-announced things. I want Panasonic. There's two things I want: Final Cut Pro 10.5 and Panasonic the GH6. Those are the two things I'm waiting for. I'm not going to rush in and buy the GH6 because I'm pretty well set right now with the GH5 and the new iPhone. But I still want to see what the heck they're doing with that.
Now, I do want to mention in Final Cut Pro 10.5 now, if it has every single feature every pro ever wanted in the next version, including a moving timeline if that's what you want, it will still take at least a couple of years for people to trust Apple, because even producing new versions of software does not mean people who have counted them out will trust them.
Oh, I
so it'll
agree
actually
with
require
that.
other things for Apple to do.
I would agree with that. Is Michael Cioni said they should change the name.
Yeah.
You know, because of that, and get away from the Final Cut Pro 10 and just do a new name. I mean, that would help, wouldn't it?
A little bit. The problem is that I'm on the board of governors of the British Film Editors, which is like a small British version of ACE. So you kind of have to have the right number of credits to be a member. And you know, when I'm talking to my fellow governors, or when I'm going to events organised by Netflix for post-production folk in London, which I did a few weeks ago, it's not that people talk about Final Cut as not being for pros. They just think Apple isn't for pros. Okay. So it's not Final Cut, really. So you're right, changing the name would help a little bit, but it would only help a little bit, because the thing is that people think that Apple aren't interested in pros. They can't explain ProRes. You know, I say, what about ProRes? And they go, well, I don't know.
What about the Mac Pro? What about the Mac Pro?
Yeah, no, they still think that everyone, it's still 2011. It's still June 2011 for nearly everybody who's editing and making TV shows and making high-end movies and stuff like that I met, and people at Netflix and stuff like that. It's still Apple aren't interested. So what they do hardware and software-wise and service-wise is interesting, but it's much more actually Apple taking part in the go-to-market strategy that actually gets third parties to stop promoting these things and solutions on their behalf. Well, you know, people like Pix. If Pix say, we really love the way Premiere works, and we made Mindhunter with it, and with FileMaker, we've got this fantastic workflow. But if there's something in it for Pix to say, but we really think that Final Cut on Apple's new solutions for collaboration means it's worth learning a bit of software that you will find difficult to learn because it's just so much better for you. It actually requires third parties to actually have to benefit from actually making that recommendation. So that's all Apple have got to do.
Yeah, you've been beating on this drum of Apple needing to support pros for a while, and I'm kind of on the same page as far as, you know, there's plenty of advertising for the iPhone and the iPads, and it just seems like there's, when it comes to Final Cut Pro, and I know they're niche markets, but when it comes to Final Cut Pro, maybe the Mac Pro has been advertised a little bit more. But it doesn't feel like it's there, and it's like the message that's being sent to me is, you know, it looks like from an external person, we know differently because we know some people who work on the software, but from the external perspective, it's like that's not a priority for them. They don't make money there. It's not a priority.
Don't make money where?
They're not going to have my back.
Don't make money
with pros. It doesn't appear that Apple cares about them.
But why would they make the Mac Pro if it's not for the pros?
I mean, it definitely is, but it's like Alex saying, trust is a hard.
No, I understand.
Really easy.
Sure.
It's really easy to scare people and everyone to flee.
Yep.
It's harder to accumulate and bring people back.
What if Final Cut Pro 10.5 is really dramatically accelerated with the Mac Pro? Those two do this, and it really ups the game. I mean, that would be a positive step, right, for the pro market, don't you think?
A little bit, but I don't think people only last year have Adobe started talking about getting to the finish line faster with Premiere, because they haven't talked about the speed of Premiere, because they can't talk about the speed of Premiere for the last 10 years. But the thing is, turns out for the people who use Premiere, it's not important.
They don't care.
By definition, it doesn't have to be rock solid. It doesn't have to be fast. It just has to be. They have to feel safe that they're using it, and that they're not feeling like an idiot for using something strange. That's so much more valuable, because that's why there's the updates from Final Cut last year, making it faster, making it NLE faster that nobody complained about the speed of. It's just like, okay, that's quite nice that you made it faster. But have you ever seen people complain about on Facebook saying, if only Final Cut were faster, you know, I can't, it's just not responsive enough for me, you know, and stuff like that.
Right.
So I don't think that will make a big difference. I think, weirdly enough, unfortunately, which is not Apple style, it actually requires lots of other stuff to do, like sponsoring, you know, Sundance, Cannes, lots of activities, lots of parties.
Sure.
and paying editors their normal weekly rate to actually learn this thing. So not even doing it for free, to say, hey, you're on $3,000 a week, you're on $1,000 a week. We're going to do a thing in, Atlanta, New York, LA, and we're going to go to the top 20 editors and say, hey, when you're all free, we're going to do a thing where you all get together, socialize. We actually create an ecosystem where you're all friends with each other, and we respect you and we value you, and then we'll pay you what you'd normally be paid for working on a high-end TV show or a feature film, and pay you to learn this stuff. Even if you think you don't need it, why not learn it? That's the way. And then people go, wow, they really care. They actually want to pay us to learn this stuff, even though it's totally rubbish. I might as well go along to this thing because, hey, I'll meet my friends. We'll have a nice thing, Yeah.
Couldn't that backfire, though? Apple's so desperate to have people try their software, they're actually paying them to use it. I wonder if that could be a PR backfire.
Well, they have people on the team, right? Editors. They at one point they had editors that they were paying.
Well, no, they what do they call that team? They have people come in to test certain features all the time,
and they pay them.
And they pay them for those things. But these are people that would already know the software, or like Sam did that back in the day. Right. So they have. I think what Alex is saying is like, you're working on whatever show, we're gonna actually. I don't know if paying them is what you have to do, but I do think that setting up something in like Hollywood, in New York, in London, probably those are the three places to start, where you actually bring people out and show them the benefits and show. It's just shocking how people don't pay attention to this, because bouncing between Resolve, Premiere, and Final Cut. Premiere's the clear loser of the three for me. Like, it's just such a clunky timeline. It's just so bad at rendering. The quality is bad. Like, by default, it's on like 8-bit rendering. It's just weird stuff. When you open, I'll put it this way: when you open Premiere for the first time and you're setting up your first project, the default setting is 2997. At least in the US, it's NTSC like 720 by 480 dB. Wow. Like, that's how old the mindset around the software is. Yes, you can then go into 100 other preferences and change it and dig around to find ProRes and make that your default. But that's like, to me, that says everything when you launch the application for the first time and it's saying, yes, it's still 1998. Like, like it's just
the psychology of lots of people. The psychology of people using Premiere, like people who like Avid a lot, but think there isn't enough resources at Avid, and they like the older version, which has the older transcription stuff that they like. They're kind of using Premiere not because they want to use it. They just want to hold Avid's feet to the fire and say, hey, look, I'm going to use Premiere. It's here. It's just good enough. Of course it isn't. But they'll use it because they want to be a bit rebellious. Just think of the attitude that people had in 2002, 2003 when they were using Final Cut. Going, A, I got it for free. B, I'm saving tons of money and I'm not being beholden to rent stupid hard drives from Avid. But they didn't, to what extent they actually felt warmly towards Final Cut initially, or towards Apple? Not particularly. It was just good to be a bit rebellious and a bit indie. And, excuse me, using something that wasn't Avid.
Well, we got a coronavirus outbreak happening in Alex's.
Alex just showed up on the UK map. He got a little pin there where he's staying.
Tracking him.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
So I hear everything you guys are saying. I mean, it's Apple should be doing more. I mean, they've skipped NAB last year. They skipped Creative Summit last year. Now, one thing we want to be clear of: Tony Oddjobs says, "I happen to know a few of the Pro Apps dev team, and they totally care about pros." We're not talking about the team. We're talking about Apple corporate. A lot of this stuff. Yeah. Apple corporate is different than the Pro Apps team.
We're talking about Tim Cook, Phil Schiller, Susan Prescott, the higher ups. That, do they understand what they have? That would be my big question. And my thing, when we were at the Creative Summit, and we went over to Apple HQ, Susan Prescott was there, and I'm like, I should have gone up and been like, you need to watch my documentary. forced her to do it. No. Tied her up. Go in another room.
Sure.
But
sure.
I wish they could just understand the community, the passion, and also just I don't know if they realize at a top level. I'm sure they're quite happy with like what Blackmagic is doing with the Mac Pro, and of course it's good that they've reached out to Avid and Adobe and others and partnered with them with Pro hardware. That's going to expand their sales, beyond a small Final Cut Pro
and
base.
Pro Tools is a big one for the Mac Pro.
Yeah. So I mean that's great, but they also should show some pride on Final Cut, and they should recognize, just like they say, hey, we've got the world's best tablet, we've got the world's best phone, we've got the world's best. They have the world's best NLE. There's nothing in my mind that says otherwise. I mean, are there things that could be better? Are there things that we like in other apps? Sure. But overall,
yeah.
And it just feels like there's this disconnect where they don't realize it. They're like, oh, it's great. Like do they look at it like Numbers and Pages and Keynote, which are great apps, but just alternatives to, Microsoft Office, and the rest of the world just uses Microsoft Office because that's what the corporate world works, fuels on.
But those apps are free though. Final Cut is $299, which at this point, $299 times 300 million users, 3.5 million users, you're talking about $1 billion that Final Cut had brought into Apple. I mean, that's more than Keynote and the rest of them, because they're not making any money.
I'm just saying, as far as when they look at the application itself, is like, oh yeah, that's good. It's a, do they know? I don't know if they do, and
yeah,
it just feels like the messaging is that they don't know that.
Think about
because if they did, they would scream it. Keynote's awesome.
Think about Keynote and Pages. The thing about Keynote and Pages and Numbers is the fact that Apple, the Apple folks, can be said to be supporting people with what they need to do to get on with their businesses, between their families, between their organizations, and they're making their lives better. Because Apple define themselves as leaving the world they find, to make it a better place. They don't really understand the benefits of video literacy. They don't really have that thing where they kind of let the benefit. Obviously, many more people need to make videos than they need to program iPhones. But of course, they get much more PR from going into schools in different parts of the world and showing the 15-year-old kids how to program iPhone apps. But what percentage of the population actually need to be developers to think that way? 1%, 3%. But how many people need to actually tell stories using video? Maybe 5, 10%. Anyway, it's a matter of getting the rest of Apple excited about editing in general, and I think that's the key for us to help the Pro Apps team get the message through to Apple to say, look, it's actually worth us having a plan. We have a plan for Mac OS, and we tell people 3 months in advance what's going to come out.
Right.
We
do the same for iOS. We just have the faith to say that we will do what we say we're going to do, and we're going to force ourselves to do what we say we're going to do by making the announcement. So we're actually going to have to do it, as opposed to saying, well, we're going to get into trouble for announcing something that we're not going to deliver, and hence the secrecy stuff.
Right.
There's so much less secrecy at Apple at the moment that I find it really weird that they just go, look, there is actually the forcing effect of actually announcing stuff and then actually having to do it. I get the impression that Final Cut Pro 10, as far as I can tell, was their plan. They don't seem to be nothing. The weird thing is they don't have any competition, which is great. It's great for them not to have any competition. They don't see Adobe as competition. They don't see Avid or anybody as being competition. And they act as if they're not competition, which is good because then they do the right thing. But on the other hand, it'd be nice if there was some kind of thing so they had some competition, so they would actually do stuff, or things would progress in whatever way they want to do, or they will communicate in some sort of way with us, by more than just features in new versions of point updates of the application.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're gonna keep their feet to the fire. 3 of us are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm just fed up. It happens every month at least that I run into somebody. Sometimes more often. It's 2020, and I still run into people that, oh, Apple just made it glorified iMovie. Like I've heard that recently, or they screwed up Final Cut, or nobody used it. I still hear it, and I'm just shocked. And what it is something that I want to. Obviously, I made a whole documentary. I do want to try to figure out a way to fix the misperception, and maybe really it's just about helping people, because when I see how much people suffer in Adobe Premiere, I'm like, there's a better way.
I think it's such a pity that there's so many, tens or hundreds of people are starting to learn Premiere every day, and they're wasting their lives. It's just such a waste of energy. It's such a waste, and it's Apple's fault. It's not even anybody else's fault. It's Apple is fault, as these people are wasting their time using a bit of software that's totally wrong for them for storytelling.
Don't a lot of those people use it because they have Photoshop already or After Effects already, and it's just there, and they use it because it's free at that point?
Actually, you just like Final Cut used to be quote free unquote in the first 10 years of this century, because the copy protection wasn't great, and Apple didn't particularly care about that aspect of it. True, it may be free, but that's why, and also to some extent, if you work if you're teaching media, at a school or a high school or a university, all that kind of stuff, people get caught up in what app professionals use, which is ridiculous. Essentially, you can write using a word processor, you can write using a typewriter. When people are taught screenwriting, they don't spend all their time in Final Draft and learning how to use Final Draft, spending their time saying, well, you don't know how to use Final Draft. Final Draft is a screenwriter software. How come you don't know how to use Final Draft? They're actually spending most of their time actually on how to write screenplays and how to develop their ideas in screenplays. And yet, with editing, everybody gets confused by using the app that other people will eventually use, as if it's that hard to learn a new one once you know how to edit. It's a bit like when I went to university a long time ago, 1985. Wow. Unix was being taught. I was taught Unix, but it wasn't because people used Unix in the real world. It was just used for students. It was like a flaky operating system that wasn't reliable, was no good. But it was really good as a way of teaching you to learn how to actually write your own operating system, or to actually write applications or do stuff of databases for multinational corporations or for governments. And Unix is a good way of learning the principles. Final Cut obviously would be the best tool to use to learn the principles of editing, and yet still people are wasting their time. And all these people, hundreds of thousands of people, are going to have to unlearn all that stuff at some point, and Apple have to make it worth their while.
Agreed.
So if we don't see Final Cut Pro 10.5 around NAB, the ghost of NAB, what is the chance we'll see some kind of mention at WWDC, which would be the next logical, or the birthday, which is June 21st?
9th birthday celebrations. I mean, thing is that WWDC, they have to help developers understand what the platform is for them to learn, to what they can do next. So, in practice, why Final Cut was if it's mentioned on the day in which they talk about hardware, then that's for the media to understand why you need powerful hardware, because, hey, everyone understands that editing needs powerful hardware. They don't really understand why you need a Mac Pro. Who needs a Mac Pro? Almost no one. And you can have a chemical, some particles moved and some DNA or maybe some engineering equipment, but video editing is obviously just as sexy, but maybe more sexy, but requires obviously lots of power. So you just go, okay, that's selling some hardware. But it's, from a developer point of view, Final Cut Pro sells the AV foundation inside the Mac OS, inside iOS and iPad OS. That's what Final Cut Pro iMovie does. So developers aren't particularly interested in that. And also they want to see one of their own. They want to see, LumaForge up there and Apple going, see? We've got a real developer here. We're going to put them up on stage. You too could be one of those developers who are putting up on stage if you get with the program. So that's why you see After Effects demoing Metal.
Yeah,
that's what like WWDC is to inspire developers to do stuff. If Apple say, hey, yeah, we've got a really good app. We had access to all this stuff 3 years ago, and now we're going to beat you with our own app. Look at it on stage. Great. People are particularly
That's true. That. That's very true.
Now, if they turned Final Cut into a platform for third-party developers, and it was a whole different thing, if it became a open source on one end to high end on the other, and it was like a continuum, then developers would be interested in that, because then Apple is saying, oh, okay, what we're doing is we're changing what Final Cut is now a platform. And if you never thought of making tools for Final Cut, all you developers, including everybody, including people who know iOS, and to create Final Cut Pro XML.
I mean, there is the argument of there being a pretty robust third-party ecosystem, but it's not to the level of people developing iOS games. It's not nearly that. It's just our little motion community.
Sure. No, I think I'd like hey, FileMaker isn't huge, but that has a developer community. People bet their daily bread on making databases for other people, and when they get calls every few days when their database needs to change. Now, Final Cut can have the same thing in terms of a video workflow for someplace, and then you say to the wider Apple, hey, we're not doing it in order to make 25,000 post-production people feel much better about their tools. That's not what Final Cut is. It's about making it so that somebody who's not a very good job, has a dream of actually helping lots of other people, could leave that not very good job, get a Mac, and then go around and sell other Macs to other people, and also solutions to make all their lives better using Mac hardware and software. That's what Final Cut Pro is, and that's what Apple hardware is. And Apple go, yeah, that's what editing is. That's really cool. That's what we're leaving the world a better place. That's a much better strategy, and the way you inspire those people to leave those jobs, and the way those people go and sell, the accountant, video making technology to get their iPhone videos to look a lot better using Final Cut, is to say this is used by the high end. It's used by high-end TV and feature film, but also I can make it so easy for you to use that you'll actually enjoy it, because that's what people forget, is it's hard to explain, and we know.
Right.
It's just so enjoyable editing with this thing. It'll never work. It's not between you and your story. You're just going, I found a new way of doing this. This is really cool. I know how to do it this one way, but let's try to do it a different way. Cool, that actually worked. I'll just get on and have fun with a new way of doing things all the time, as opposed to being stuck in a rut, which you have to be with these other LAs. So, yeah.
Good point.
I have nothing to add to that.
The sermon is over for now, but it will keep on going on forever. I apologize.
No, that's
Amen,
okay.
Alex.
I think we're all in the same boat as far as that goes. So, all right, gentlemen, I sure appreciate you coming on. Alex, we'll get you back on when we do an NAB stuff. I'll give you some notice as much as I can. I just decided this morning to come on, and I was just going to talk about, just people are home and they maybe want a little break from what's going on. And I figured that, and then I started inviting people. I said, come on, let's see if you guys can come over here. So.
Well, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much, and I will talk to you in the future, especially if 10.5 is dropped at some point. I keep checking the App Store at least once or twice a week.
Well, it's in 15 minutes until the next time it might happen, and then another hour and 15 minutes.
Okay.
But maybe not today.
There you go. Thanks, gentlemen. Talk to you later.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.